Welcome to Paint and Hang, everybody, and this week's deep speech here with Luke from Nerdcraft HQ. Um, Sorry for those who were waiting for the Paint and Hang for the epic conclusion of my here, but it was a holiday, so deal with it. But anyway, so this week with Nerdcraft HQ and Luke, we're going to talk about DMing, getting started, and we actually got a bunch of questions from you guys for this one, so that's really awesome. So let's get started. Sorry, Luke. It's all right. Below our images are our handles for our Instagrams. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe and bell under the Twitch and Paint Club as well on YouTube. That way you can follow us afterwards. And then I think we're trying to work on getting this as a
podcast.
That's the word, podcast. It's been a day.
Working on the RSS feed situation with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So now that the intro's not going, let's transition from last week with the question that we had about a problematic player. But this time, let's talk about it more from the DM side, which is still very similar to what we talked about, but maybe some practical ways as a DM to handle that player. So, if you know there's a problematic player, first and foremost, talk to them. It doesn't have to be during the game, doesn't have to be during the session. And in this case, it doesn't have to be in person, but over the phone or the most personal way you can get a hold of them, talk to them.
Agreed.
See if they're even aware that they're causing that tension. They might not be aware, who knows the circumstance. See if they're aware. If they are aware, then let them know that it's maybe not the best course of gameplay, or it's not going to work in the future. It's okay to put your foot down on some things, right? If someone's uncomfortable and their behavior, and from another person's behavior, it's okay to say, hey, this is not cool for the table. As the DM, it's important that you don't be overbearing, but you do stand firm to help the entire table out in terms of feeling good. And that's the way you're going to have success.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, for me, I fully agree, just because with communicating, because like we talked about last week, right, where it's, you as a player and the point of D&D and ways of playing D&D, at the end of the day, it's supposed to be you and your friends having fun. And if somebody is not making it fun, then it's like you need to figure that out and talk about it. And like you said, maybe they don't know they're doing it. Like I played with a dude who was he grew up with video games that were first person shooters and they were fantasy and this, that, and the other, but the way he played it was, we joked like he played to win. Like he would take all the loot and stuff, and so like me and a couple of other people had to like pull him aside and be like, hey bud, that's, you might want to cool down with that because it's, not whatever. But at the same time, like I said, it's everybody needs to be having fun. So I would pull everybody to the side and be like, hey, this is what you're doing. This is the problem or issue that it's causing. Can we alleviate that a little bit?
Yeah, totally into that. And then honestly, beyond that, if it's an issue, or if it continues to be an issue, then it's more of a matter if, again, like we talked about last week, if that person is a fit for the table, right? If they're listening to you but not changing that behavior, then either they're not comprehending what you're saying or they're choosing not to listen. Both of them are obviously issues because the behavior is continuing. One of them is not great because that means that they're choosing to be like that, and therefore maybe they shouldn't be at your table.
Right.
And I mean, you wouldn't want somebody problematic at your table anyways. If you've already tried to help them in a nice way and offer them other solutions, and they refuse, then really I wouldn't want to play with somebody like that personally. So it seems like a pretty easy segue to be like, well, it was nice playing with you, friend, but I think we
Well,
have to part ways.
I mean, and that's just it. And I mean, and to give a little example of like what's going on in me in my life with my game, my I was feeling like some of my players weren't having fun. And I felt like even though they were telling me they were having fun, I'm always like super critical of myself. I think that's just like the artist brain where I'm like
Oh yeah,
always self-critical.
that's the
Um,
right brain syndrome.
right. So, but I also know that I had another player who actively tried to bail, or wanted to bail because he was feeling overwhelmed with just other things he had going on.
Hmm.
So, and then there started becoming a lot of scheduling conflicts. So it was more or less like my anxiety thing was like, well, if we got the scheduling conflicts and then we got this one guy who's feeling overwhelmed and wanting to bail, like maybe everybody else really isn't having fun. So what I did was I just kind of put everything on pause for a little bit. And I was just kind of like, hey, we're just going to put this on pause to see if everybody's schedule doesn't mellow out a little bit. And then we'll revisit this in a few weeks. And then if, you feel like you're not having fun and you want to bail, it's kind of like, here's your out. And one person took that out. Everybody else was like, nope, we need to get this rig rolling. And we're super stoked to get back at it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody needs to have fun. And if somebody's not having fun, if you're a player, speak up, talk to your GM or DM, and be like, hey, I'm really not enjoying it because of X, Y, and Z. And it might be something as simple as um, a character tweak. Maybe they picked a background that they're not feeling. And it's like,
Right.
okay, so like I know me as a DM, until you get to like higher levels, like generally like my cutoff, and this kind of has come one of those like other questions you have coming on is like homebrew rules, but it's like at level 5, that's for me like the cutoff. If you're like up in like 3 and 4 and you're like this doesn't working, like even like an issued weapon from the beginning, change it. Like it's not really going to affect me that much. Like if you like
Hmm.
the idea of swinging a battle axe instead of a longsword, they're both d8s. So who cares? In my mind, at least, because
Oh yeah.
I want everybody to have fun. So if you're a player not having fun, speak up. And if you're being a problem, you know, then I would just have a sit down with them and just call it a day.
I even extend that what you said earlier, extend that idea further. If we're sitting at level 10 and things are getting stagnant for you, there's a lot of options as a DM that I can throw your way to make things different or better
Sure.
or multi-classing. I mean, there's a handful of things. So as a
Maybe a magic
DM,
item might be a band-aid fix until there's
yeah,
like a feat at like depending on where you're at. You might be able to do a
right.
feat and a magic item.
And so from a DM's perspective, be sure that you're, again, like we said last week, but really be sure that you're checking in with your players. I check in with my players on a weekly basis. After the game, we usually chit chat for a few minutes, maybe 20, 30 minutes, sometimes even an hour, talk about what happened. And then throughout the week, I check in with all my players individually and we just talk. Of course, they're my friends, so we talk anyways, but we do set aside specific time to talk about D&D, how they felt,
Sure.
and like the next step, just because especially right now that we're not sitting around the table together, we're not reading each other's emotions and feeding off of that. We've got to have another way to connect.
Right.
And so it just so happens that we have been able to do that, but I think that's super important. And I
Agreed.
think, yep,
And one
go ahead.
easy way to do that is just for my group, we made a Discord server that's just for our D&D game. And I've
Mhm.
made in there you can make private channels that is like only certain people are allowed to see that channel. So like I have one for every player. So it's literally a private, like I call them DM secrets, but it's also like just a private D&D only space for either player secrets from like that character's god, or even if it's just a private like, hey, this is really bugging me.
Mhm.
They have that little outlet channel for them to type into if they don't want it to be on record as an email or text message, or they don't feel comfortable enough during the corona's times to come over. They have
Mhm.
that little bit there. And then it's also group stuff. And like I also like it too, especially for playing online, because I can put I have a whole nother like magic item channel. So like anytime there's a
Mm,
magic item, I just dump it right in there.
yep. Yeah, I love Discord. I have the same exact type of situation where
But
just got a bunch of different channels for different reasons, and it's great. And we have
yeah,
a main like just dump channel where we talk and post funny images, and
yeah,
it all ends up being D&D related enough because what there's only a few of us, so it's not like getting over. People
right,
are posting random links and stuff. But yeah, it's good. I
right.
recommend Discord for that
Yeah, I
for
mean, if
sure.
there's, but back to the question of, if there's ever any time there's an issue, period, and I'm just gonna leave it at issue, and it's a problem with your DM, problem with your player, problem with a co-player, communication.
Hmm.
Pull them to the side and talk to them about it, and try to do it in the most polite way ever, because you don't want to attack a person.
Right. Definitely.
Uh,
Yeah.
we actually have a couple questions in the chat going on. The
Oh yeah.
biggest model you guys have,
Like
I would assume like
painted
terrain,
model.
terrain. Like I would assume model is in like D&D model, like either a minifig or terrain piece.
Sure. One of my biggest role model because I have that too. Um, I'm looking at mine right now. That I built or paint? I mean, I don't know.
It's an open-ended question. Just the biggest model you guys have.
Fair. Um, I made. Oh, that's a tough one.
Mine is a 3D printed Nightwalker that I did in
Ooh,
color shift paint. I actually have two of them. They're a 3-inch base. They're really tall, really thin, but they're fun. That's one of the biggest ones I have. The biggest I have, probably as far as like scale, is probably the Orc Tower I built for last month's Encounter Terrain. It's a
no,
four
that's
by
dope.
four. It stands about 7 inches tall.
Okay, yeah. I didn't. Okay, sure. I built a wizard tower that stands about 12 inches tall for one of the encounter terrain,
It's not the size of the tower; it's how you use it.
and it has it's like a deranged like mad wizard, and so he transmuted beholder stalks to the top of it to protect it.
That's
Um,
awesome and
it's pretty cool.
scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's not. It's something, and there's no doors or windows on the tower, so you can't get into it unless you teleport. Which, if you've
Right.
never been in there, then you're gonna risk the chance of going into a wall and getting like 10d10 force damage or whatever it is.
Did you get that idea from Critical Role?
No,
Really?
really, truly.
Okay. Well, then you and Matt are like minded people.
Well, I mean, I feel like all DMs are like-minded, right?
No, because in,
Is that from the second campaign?
yeah, in the second campaign, in,
I've only watched until Homeboy dies
oh,
by
yeah.
by the on the road. I'm like
Yeah.
only 30 episodes into campaign 2.
Well, then spoilers. The one beach town they go to, there's actually a wizard's tower that has no doors or windows.
Oh shit. That's kind of
Yeah,
cool. Is it
and
like a crazy dude?
I mean he's a wizard in a windowless and doorless tower, so I mean that's kind of inherent.
I suppose so. The idea that I had
He
was
does
that
have a goblin butler, which is amazing.
oh, that's fun.
You'll get
The idea
there. You'll get
yeah,
there.
eventually I will.
You'll get there, and you'll enjoy it. I promise you. You won't be upset.
And then another, I guess the other one that I have, which is kind of, it's actually bigger technically, is this windmill. And what's his face? I think his name is John from Tabletop Witchcraft, the YouTube channel. He put out like a tutorial on how to make a windmill, and I
Okay,
loosely followed it. And that one's actually pretty big,
got you.
but it's nice. Have that on my
Yeah.
Instagram somewhere.
I mean, yeah. If for the mutant Deathclaw who asked the question, follow either of us on our Instagrams. There, we post our Instagrams basically are nothing but miniatures.
Pretty much.
Um,
Yep. Pretty
I know that's
much.
what that one is for me. It's all my miniatures and dice and D&D endeavors because that's my D&D one. But
Yes.
what's the next question on your list you got there? Because I know you got a bunch this month
Oh
or this
yeah,
week.
I've got a few. I'll start with the ones that are like more serious, and then we can end on some of the funner ones.
Sure.
So what's the most important thing to have prepped prior to playing is a question that we got.
Okay. Most important
Um,
thing to have prepped.
I have an answer right away. For
Sure,
me,
go for it while I think, because you've
um,
had these questions a lot longer than I've had.
I have. I even briefly answered some of them.
I
But
saw.
for me, it's my nerves is the biggest one.
Ooh.
No matter what, even if I'm playing in a long, I've been playing in the same campaign for months now. And been playing with the same players for years, right? We just start
Sure.
new campaigns. Sometimes I get nervous, and that's just a part of who I am. And so I like to do a checklist and remember that, hey, these are my friends, and they're gonna have fun no matter what, and just keep my nerves in check. The next thing I have is the availability of my notes within arm's reach.
Hmm.
I shouldn't have to move to have any of my notes. And a lot of my notes are now digital, so I literally can just go on my iPad and search things, which
Yeah,
is
I use
great.
Apple's Pages, so I can have it on any of my devices, any of my Apple devices.
Yep. But otherwise, if you don't use something like that and you are a pen and paper, have your notes within arm's reach, so that you can be ready to either write a note down or pull up information relatively seamlessly. And I know that's kind of two different answers, but one is, practical answer, and one is like an emotional answer.
I think that's
Yeah.
fair. I think the thing to have prepped. I think for me, because it's like it's hard. That's a hard question, right? And I feel like it comes down to your DMing style. Because if you're the
Mhm.
type of DM that wants to have that full table of miniatures where they walk through the entire table constantly, then you need to have that prepped. If you're the kind, like if you've watched Critical Role, I like the method that Matt Mercer plays with, where it's all theater of the mind, and then having a battle mat for encounters. You need to have at least an idea of that battle mat drawn up. I think
Right.
for me, to piggyback on yours, is notes. And for me, in my notes, is I like to have, I pre write a lot of detailed stuff. So I don't have to think about it on the fly. And what I mean by that is detailed stuff like the name of the inn or tavern, the menu that the tavern has, the the bartender's name, race, um, general like attitude, note things like that, so I don't have to break my brain thinking about a lot of stuff off the bat.
Mm.
Um, and there's like Donjon and other sites have like generators for stuff like that. That if you don't want to sit and write down all that stuff, but for me, I'm an information person, so like for me, it's having all that written down. So like right now, my party's in a town, and I had the town broken down into different wards, and there's a shipping ward, and there's the name and a description for that ward. I have a list of boats that are at the docks, along with captains for those boats. I have a like dive bar on the docks with a description, and I have patrons in the bar's descriptions. Like there's a bard in the one, and then the bard's name and the song he's playing, and like I go to information overload just so I have it.
Right.
Same with like if I'm planning any type of encounter, I have all the stat blocks together in my notes, and I'll either you know take a picture with my phone of the stat block in the book, or I'll find it on like Roll20 or you know whatever, and I'll have that stat block in my notes as well.
Mm.
So I personally try to have all that stuff done, because no matter what you plan, your players are gonna blow up your plans. They're gonna go, oh cute, you had a plan, great, hold my beer, watch this. So like for me, I like having that overarching stuff, and having a general idea of how you want your players to go through the game, giving them like what I call the illusion of choice. So like if they're going through, like when my players are going from, they're going trekking through a jungle over a mountain range into the valley where this city is or this town is, and I basically gave them, I made up some tables to roll different skills to navigate themselves through the jungle. And if they failed, they had an encounter of some sort, be it a monster or natural encounter of like loose rocks on a hillside or whatever. And if they were successful, then they found their way closer. So it's like kind of no matter what they chose and where they wanted to go, they still got to the end. You know what I mean? It's kind of that illusion of choice. Or it's like if you're gonna have like this thing out in the woods, this encounter out in the woods, you want them to find this thing, but you in your head you really want it to be on the south side of the town, and they refuse to go to the south side of the town, then just move it to the western side of the town. Doesn't much matter. But for me, the most important thing to prep for me is that tertiary information, we'll call it. Because then if they decide to go into a shop, I don't need to make it up as I go.
Yeah. And then I had technically a third answer for mine, and that was a list of NPC names that are unused. So it's just like a list of names, so I can look at the list and check it off. Okay, use that name and maybe write down what they are. Just if they're at, if your players are really curious and say, oh, I want to speak to this person, or I want to speak to this person. Right. Of course, I don't have 100,000 names in my head ready to go, or 100,000 NPCs. Like you just are ready to go to the next
that's
one.
A really good one. A good list of items as well. Like, and this is kind of like what I was saying with like items, like if you have like a magic shop, having a list of basic magic items, and then if they were looking for a magic item, then you just decide if they wanted it or not.
I was looking for my binder because in my binder I have this epic list of like it's just, you can find it online. It's just somebody went in and made a nice Excel list of magic items, and it's amazing.
And for those who are just starting out too, if you don't want to sit and like super hunt stuff down, like there are definitely resources like that, but there's also like fantasynamegenerators.com, and it is with a plural. You can just crank out name after name after name after name after name. There's also a cool book series. I don't have them, they're in my other room, but it's legitimately a book series I found on Amazon. They're like $10 a piece for a book, and each book has nothing but random tables of like food, beverages, ship names, people names, town names. It's just, the whole book is just random tables, and each one is like a different like setting. So it's they're kind of cool. Jay Makes Off said, when I prep for DM, is that the name, right?
No, but that's okay.
I'm sorry, I can't read from here.
That's okay. Sorry, it's Josh. One time we had a conversation about how people always get his name wrong. So when you're about to read it, I like really listened to him because I was like,
oh yeah, I'm bad with last names. But anyway, he said when he preps for DMing, I have an outline of what will happen regardless of what the players do. Things still happen if they want to go totally off the rails. Yeah. He said, no worries. I really do apologize, though. But yeah, that's kind of what I was saying with the illusion of choice. So it's like if you want them to, get jumped by people on the roadside and they decide to deviate and go through the woods, they can still get jumped in the woods. Right.
Yes. I will say, though, I do let my players influence the world.
Sure.
Even on a big scale, if it comes down to it. So if something needs to happen, it'll happen, right? Like you guys are saying. But I'm not afraid to sometimes let a decision that my player make really change the landscape of
my one player, to your point, a player in my game, decided that he wants to be a changeling, and that went AWOL from a crime syndicate. I had no plans of making a crime syndicate going through the continent. I had no plans of having changelings on my continent. Guess what? There are now. And there is a crime syndicate now, along with a special deity that they all worship. And I completely let him make it. And I'm like, cool. But, since he went rogue, it lets me play things, because then it's like, okay, you went rogue. So now I get to randomly send assassins at you because you went rogue and they're not happy about it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's a good transition a little bit
okay.
for a question that I got, which was any tips for getting better at improvising? Because we're talking a lot about kind of working on the
Hmm.
fly. So the best way to improvise, I guess, I'm not a professional by any means, but I think is to know your product really well so that you can
Yes.
improvise around what already exists. So, taking the time, like we said, to have your notes and stuff for certain things, but not everything, will really allow you to improvise. So, let's say you have a bar and it has a barkeep, um, and you have this list of NPC names, and for some reason they want to talk to someone who is adjacent to the barkeep for whatever reason. Let's say your players are just insistent on that. Well, you have to improvise that because you didn't plan a person adjacent to the barkeep. But now you have a list of names, you have an establishment that they're associated with, and you have a pre made NPC that they're also associated with. So you take that list of names, you pick one, you give them a generic attitude really quickly. Let's say happy, sad, angry, quiet, stoic, doesn't matter. Pick one that makes sense. And you've got yourself an improvised NPC on the fly right there.
Right.
And you've already done most of the work. You literally just took the pieces together and made a new thing. You didn't have to fully come up with an idea. And that can really work with not just NPCs, but a lot of different things. If you've already made the framework, it's really simple to fill things in.
Right. For me, for my one of my suggestions to learn um some better improv would be, one is watch some videos on it on YouTube. If you really want to get better at improv, and the first thing you're going to hear is, I'm actually lucky enough to where one of my friends did a lot of improv classes, so he's been able to like help me out on the fly. And this is why like Critical Role is so good, because they all are pro actors, and first thing you do is improv. But it's the yes and thing. Like everybody's probably always heard that yes and thing, and it's basically like not getting butthurt over somebody doing something that you didn't want. Just roll with it. Just accept it. It's a thing now, and just build on it. Like, you know, and then it's, for me, it's also trying to quickly draw from other experiences into, like, Luke, like what you said about knowing your product. So like there ended up being an entire session that I had of a complete like street chase where they're like the typical like running through the streets and everything else, and then that was completely impromptu. So for me, I'm a dude who likes to learn. So for me, it's regurgitating knowledge in a unique way. And then also making them, if they want to do something crazy, then challenge them on it. Just roll with it, but then challenge them on it. So like the one guy that was trying to chase this girl down the street was the paladin that was super clanky. So I'm like, well, how are you chasing them? Are you just blindly like buddy cop running down the street? Or are you just trying to be sneaky and following? And they're like, well, sneaky. I'm like, all right, well then roll me a stealth. And then that stealth blew up because he's clanky and he rolls at disadvantage. So like for me, that's how I do improv, where it's just like knowing what I want to try to get across with my game, and then just trying to, I don't know, it's hard. That's hard for me, where it's like I just try to regurgitate things on the fly. So like example, what I mean by that is like during Prohibition era, Al Capone always had a way out. He always had like secret tunnels and stuff between buildings. And when they finally caught the girl they were chasing, she ended up going into the basement of the one bar and going through a tunnel that was very like a la Al Capone, because I didn't want them to catch her. So that was me getting away with it while them having a fun street chase.
Mm.
And like, and part of me challenging them with like the stealth thing, the rogue that's the changeling, he's like, every time I get to a new corner, I want to change my appearance. So he kept changing his appearance so he could get advantage on his stealths. And it was interesting. But for me, I think it's that yes and just trying to roll with it the best you can. No one's going to be amazing about it off the bat. And if you're new, I also wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't worry about being the perfect DM off the bat. It's just it's something that has to be practiced. You know, just like anything else. Like if you ever learned an instrument, you weren't a savant right off the bat. You practiced and practiced and practiced. So like Luke and I, we do painting. I'm not the best, but I'm a lot better than I was a year ago.
Same.
Because I've practiced. And the improv thing is kind of the same thing. There are videos you can do that can help on like YouTube, or even like the masterclass series if you want to do that. But it's mostly just that yes and trying to learn to roll with the punches and having that information, like Luke said, at hand for me, of like trying to figure something out. Even if it's like they're in a jungle and you know, maybe you have, if they have a jungle, maybe you have a list of monsters that could be come across in that jungle or that wooded area or wherever. That way, if they do go rogue, you have a list of things you can do. And if they're not like stealthing through and just being like loud and obnoxious, you know, in reality, if you're being loud and obnoxious through woods, animals are going to notice. The more timid animals like a deer are going to run, and the predators are going to take notice and wonder if you're food. So, you know, you could do that in a game setting too. If you're traipsing through, you know, a jungle, like I said about my crew traveling, if they failed their check to find a game trail, find whatever, they ended up with an encounter. And I rolled for that encounter on a little table I made. But you could have a set of things, of animals or people or whatever, to help you with your improv by having just like a randomized table. That can definitely help as well. But if it's a story improv, it's just practice. It's practice and knowing your environment. And, you know, things like I said earlier about, you know, having all the ship names, having all the captains to the ship names, having the bar, having that stuff, that can help fill in gaps for you mentally to be able to improv on that. It's just kind of like if you've ever worked retail, right? And somebody asks you about a random product, and like a specialized retail, like I used to work at like Guitar Center and I used to work at like Apple. There pretty much wasn't anything anybody could ask me about in like Apple that I wouldn't have an answer to. And it's because I knew the products, you know. So it's, and that answering a random question from a customer is in a way improv. It's going, yes, and this is that answer, you know, but it's knowing the product gives you that fast response. It's why a guy like a Matt Colville or a Matt Mercer can answer so fast. It's because Mercer literally spent years creating that continent. So he knows that world inside and out to where he can't be thrown. That'd be my suggestion.
Also, it's like, I don't mean this in like a possessive way, but it's your world. So if you just say something exists, then it exists.
Yeah.
So.
But if you're going to do that, if you're going to be like, if you're going to make up a whole new thing off the top of your head of like a spring or a monument or whatever, write that shit down, because your players will ask you about it later. And if you didn't write it down, you're going to be boned. I don't care what it is. Like Luke's name that he checks off, like you need to note down somewhere that what's going on. I keep 2 notebooks when I DM. I have that are written ones. I have my digital typed notes, and then I have one notebook that is just for the initiative tracking, and then I have another notebook of game things that happen in game. So like if I make up that they're in the woods and they come up to this giant thing, like they found a well that if you threw money in, you got the wish spell or luck spell for 24 hours. So like I know, like if they wanted to go find that again, I'd have to let them go find that again. So like that needs to be a thing. So if you're going to make it up, write it down. Just do yourself that favor.
Yeah. Speaking of made up things, a fun question is, for
I'm
me at
setting
least,
up your segues left and right, aren't I?
you are, is do you have a favorite homebrew rule? And if you've ever seen any of my content, you know that I love homebrew things because I don't know, I'm just a glutton for homebrew. So I have 1,000 favorite rules, but I will whittle it down to one or three.
One that I have that I really enjoy. I don't really have many because I've only been DMing for a few years, so I don't have many. One that I do have, two that I have that I really like. One is a character specific, where I took some of the UA companion rules and I reworked them to work for anybody rather than just a ranger. And I did it with like a series of. I basically made a table. I said
You said
series.
series.
Yeah,
God damn it.
yeah. Um, I did a. They had to make us. I know it completely derailed me. Just like you have the death saves, you know what I mean. You have to. There was a animal handling set very similar to where if you got, I think it was like 8 successful animal handlings, you got to forever have this animal as your pet. And the companion rules are cool because it kind of lets you use that companion in battle. And in this instance, I like using. My game also has 3 DMs in it as players, and a couple of them like reading the rule books as fun. So if I
Mhm.
put a monster on the table, they know the stat block off the top of their head. So I like messing with them by using Warhammer minis and then giving them a stat block. So in this instance, it was Squigs that had the stat block of a Velociraptor.
Mm.
So now my one player has a pet Squig that's technically a Velociraptor.
Mhm.
So that's something fun that I enjoy. Um, Homebrew magic items are always fun, especially if they make sense. Like my one guy, he wants to make a cross between, like, he basically wants to make like a lightning whip, kind of like
Mm.
the Yukio, or what that was her name from Deadpool 2.
Mm.
The
Yeah,
girlfriend
man.
there in Deadpool 2, she had like this lightning whip. He wants to do something similar, so that's always a fun thing. But my personal favorite that I picked up from one of my friends that's a DM is hit dice.
Mm.
So hit dice, by rule, it's you roll it and it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do is you never get a 1 because 1s suck, especially if you're a wizard. And what I'll do is I roll a secret dice. So say like Luke, you're rolling a D8 for your hit dice. I roll a D8 and you can't see my number, and you roll a D8 and you have your number. You pick, do you want my dice or your dice?
Wow. Hmm.
So
Interesting.
it's a little bit like blind gambling.
Mm-hmm.
So I always so it's kind of like blackjack with dice. And I always
Mm-hmm.
go like if it's 60%, if I roll to 60% or max or higher, I keep it. If I roll lower, then I just take it. So like on a D8, for example, I would keep like a 6 or higher.
Mm-hmm.
If it was like a 3, I would take his dice.
Mm.
But
I
ones get
see.
re-rolled. So like if I rolled a 1, I would re-roll that one.
Oh, okay.
You know, because ones are no fun. But yeah, it's a bit of a gamble thing. So I like that.
Ah, interesting. Ah, that's cool. That's a fun like little twist.
Mm-hmm.
I have like lists and lists because I just make up rules on the spot. Not like to hinder, but to make things more fun.
Sure.
If somebody's like, that's not fun, I'm like, all right, let's let's change it.
Sure.
Literally in the middle of the game.
I mean,
But
and hey, the
in,
guy who co-wrote D&D openly said there's a lot of ambiguity for that reason.
mhm. I think that the from the player side, my players probably find the most fun out of a very simple homebrew rule, which I'm sure other people use, which is flanking for fifth edition. So if
Yes.
you and somebody are
Yep.
on the opposite side, then you have advantage. That's really simple.
I thought that was an
And
optional rule in 5e. Is it not?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. maybe it is, but I've encountered a lot of DMs who do not use it in fifth edition.
Yeah, my friend doesn't.
So
He like refuses to do it. I think
yeah.
if my I that one I do know of, and I've left that up to my players for my game. I was like,
Mm,
"Do you want to do flanking?" Because they asked me. I was like, "That's up to you guys. If you,
mm,
as a consensus, want to do it, I will do it. If you, as a
mm.
consensus, don't want to do it, then I won't do it."
And then personally, um, hmm, man, there's so many to choose from. I'm actually working on two right now that I'm not going to say because they're for something pretty cool.
And your players
One
might
of
be
them has,
watching.
well, and more than that too. We'll see where it goes,
So
but
let's do it this way. If I was starting a new game tonight, and you're
mhm.
gonna play in my game, what's that one rule that you want me to run? That one homebrew rule. You're like, please run this. It'll just be so much fun.
Hmm, I would say flanking. Like flanking is great. I think it's so simple, but
I'm already doing flanking. Pick another one.
pick another one. If it's a long-term campaign, I like to run the homebrew where if you die and you do come back, it's harder to come back a second time. So making death more like, because if there's clerics in your game, some people run whole campaigns where they don't have clerics or paladins,
Hmm.
which is crazy to me. But if clerics are rare in your setting, and you do happen to be brought back to life, then it's harder a second time. So your DC goes up after you die,
Got
um,
you.
which I think is kind of makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Um, Man, I had a good one because I answered it with one of them, but I just can't remember what it was. Hmm.
Well,
I'll just say flanking. That
okay.
works.
Flanking works.
The players love it. I mean,
Yeah.
I like it as a player. My players enjoy it, and you don't always get the opportunity to flank. It's not like every single time somebody's going to be flanking.
Right.
It's just on the occasion when it happens, it's really great to get advantage. You
Right.
know.
And sometimes, and what's nice that I like about it is like, if you're playing a character like a fighter or something that you don't get advantage on all the time, it's nice to have the advantage every once in a while. Like rogues,
Right.
you like if you're a ranged rogue, like if you're a rogue with a bow or a rogue with a crossbow or whatever, you could basically hide and then get advantage, pop out and shoot from a distance. But if you're
Mm.
like a monk, it's kind of hard to get advantage because you're like up in their face.
I do make my rogues roll stealth every time, though.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Well, if they're supposed to hide, then yeah, they have to
Yeah.
roll.
Right. I know that I've seen some people be lax about it, and I've seen some confusion in forums as well. Um,
So
in forums, who am I?
was it Jason? You said it was earlier.
Josh.
Josh. He said we use flanking as well. It just makes sense tactically, which I
Yep.
fully agree.
100%.
Currently, our DM is homebrewing, rolling the death saves for us. It's
Ooh,
scary, but I love it. That's
interesting.
interesting.
Well, along with the harder to come back, this is by the way, this is like adapted from the first time I've seen this, was from Matt Mercer with his like death rules, and so I've adopted that. So I don't roll for the players, but there is has to be some kind of ritual process to bring them back to life.
Sure.
So it can't just be, you can't just pay the gold and then they come back to life. I feel like there's not enough weight to that. There's not enough stakes in that. It doesn't feel emotionally satisfying to me. So
Ooh, that just
yeah,
prompted a question for me to you. How
yeah.
much of a rule Nazi are you when it comes to things like components for spells? Because I know some DMs
Um,
don't care because it's like if you're like a wizard, for example, you need certain things to do your job.
right.
Like are you like a bolt counter or like, you know,
Kind of. So many rules I'm very lax on. So almost all the rules. Um, but I do like certain things to be available. For example, I had a player die 2 weeks ago. They didn't have a diamond. worth
Yeah.
300 gold pieces. Sorry, there's no ritual
Right.
happening without the diamond. In that way, they did manage to circumvent that problem, and the player did come back to life. But there was a different way, and there was a slight penalty that happened. Not because they didn't have a diamond, but because it. Well, I guess it is because they didn't have a diamond, but it was because they didn't have the ability to cast that spell. They had to seek out another person to have them help bring that person back to life. So
Right.
yeah, I do. I'm so loosey goosey on most of the rules that yeah, when it comes to like how many bolts you have, I don't personally count, but like if we've done like 6 battles and they've been shooting arrows the entire time, I was like that quiver of 20 arrows is probably getting low. You'll probably need to hit up a shot pretty soon.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't count each arrow. You know.
Yeah. I played with a dude who was like, he made you, if you didn't go through the motion of saying, I'm drinking water, you'd make you roll a con save.
The only time that I've done that was when they were in the jungle, and that was a threat for everybody. But I
Right.
provided them with like water sources and stuff, and they experienced less combat, and it was more of like a skill check
Oh no, he did it
situation.
all the time.
Yeah, that
All the
sounds
time.
terrible.
Like, even like in the bar, he'd be like, are you eating? And it's like, no, I'm going to stare at all the food and not even pick at it. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, that sounds
But,
miserable. My
um,
players love the like campfire moments, so they always are like, "Oh, I'm gonna go hunt some food or cook some things." It's
so
great.
my amazing discovery recently that's sort of D&D related, but not D&D related.
Hmm.
In Critical Role 2, you might not have gotten there yet, but they make the comment of pocket bacon, where they just take all the bacon from the bar and put it in their pocket for later. Pocket bacon.
Okay,
Dunkin'
yeah.
Donuts now has pocket bacon. You can
That's
literally just buy like a
ridiculous.
little thing of bacon and just fucking eat it. I'm like, yo, Dunkin' Donuts is pocket bacon. They don't call it
Oh
pocket
my
bacon, but it's
god.
pocket bacon. Um, so
What a
one
weird
question I
thing.
got actually from Josh
Oh yeah.
is this is the only question I got. So thank you, Josh, for making me feel
Josh
useful.
Josh is a great dude.
Yes, and
Times
also a
10.
great painter.
Also an amazing painter and
Um,
all around maker.
so his question was, how do you guys deal with scheduling? Do you run sessions with missing party members, and how do you deal with that in game? So, what I do, and this is what like I was telling you earlier, Luke, what I do is if it's scheduling, of course, Josh, he said thanks. We only speak the truth, my friend. Um, what I do is I try to keep my games on the same night. That
Mhm.
way it's a routine, like trash day. Not a great analogy, but it's like, every week on this day, you need to put your trash out, which I need to do.
Actually, same.
What a coincidence.
Well, and side note, the because of the raging fires and smoke, they weren't actually able to pick up the trash yesterday. So hopefully they can tomorrow. But it's
Oh,
been crazy over here.
yeah. Um, so I try to do that for the consistency. If there is a scheduling issue where somebody has to drop out, I generally so my party was 5. So if I still had 3, I'd run the game anyway. If now that's going to be 4 when we start back up, I'm going to, probably be like if it's still 3, maybe 2, I'll still run. I generally like having 50% or more.
Hmm.
If it's less than that, then I postpone. And if it needs to get postponed or moved, then it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, for me, it's a communal thing. So, like, if we all can't enjoy it, then let's just wait till we can.
Mhm.
But, like, if somebody does need to step out, it is what it is. And how I handle it in game is honestly, I just kind of ignore that they're there. That might not be the best route to go, but it's almost like, yeah, they're not feeling great, so they're just going to stay at the inn. And everybody else just kind of moves on in the town, you know,
Yeah.
and then I just adjust my battle accordingly. So like if it was gonna be, you know, 3 phase spiders, now maybe it's 2, or maybe it's 2 and a couple of babies, instead of whatever. I adjust my encounters. If it is something that they're going to be useful for, then it's every once in a while I'll ask for all my players' sheets, like a copy of their sheets, in whatever form they want to send it to me. So that way, if they are absent and it's something like bringing somebody back from the dead. So say you have a cleric in your party and they're the ones missing. Somebody goes down in battle. You know that your cleric in the party has that spell, has that 300 gold, or has that diamond, and can perform that ritual to bring that person back. That the party doesn't have a dead person because your cleric couldn't make it that week.
Right.
Other than that, like, I don't want to run battle for somebody else, because for me, it's already daunting enough to keep track of all my monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And I do mean all, because it's hardly ever just one. Like, well, because it's a war setting for me. So like they'll run into like a squad of like orcs that happens to have a couple ogres with them as well. So it is like a dozen dudes that they're fighting. It's never just like, rarely is it's just one like big thing.
I
So
see.
for me, it's hard to do that. So I just tend to ignore that they're there. Or like if they were like, the one person couldn't make it the 1 week, but they were just kind of scouting the city, I just had them scout a different section, and then I just reported back, basic level stuff of what was there, because I know what the town contains, because I made the town.
There you go.
But what about you? What do you do, Luke?
If okay, so right now I have 3 players, and my ideal is 4 players. So 4 players and me. I've ran campaigns with 8 or 9 people. I find it to be a nightmare.
Indeed.
I could do 5 people, but I really prefer 4 players and myself, so 5 people in total.
I don't like
That
going
way-
over 5 players.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Like I could, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
So if one person is missing, of my current 3 players, we'll still play. If 2 people are missing, then it's just me and another person, and it
Right.
doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I would say, yeah, if it's one person missing, I can do it. And on the occasion, if it's 2 people missing, depending on what's happening, then we can still do it. But chances are I'll just say, hey, let's wait till next week. And I have found that the more relaxed I am about that, the more often we end up playing. And that seems kind of backwards, because in my head I think, no, I need to be on them. We need to like make sure we're playing every week and this and that. But for whatever, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like the more relaxed you are, the more leniency you give them, the happier they're going to be, right? Maybe
Right.
somebody, it doesn't matter why they can't be there. And frankly, it's none of my business why they can't be there.
Sure.
But that's totally fine. And I'll see you next week. And if you just be positive about it and say, I'll see you next week, and have that positive affirmation, chances are if it was a less than, I don't know, if they were just feeling bad and didn't want to join for whatever reason, they'll have better spirits. And if they
Right.
just couldn't join, they'll be eager to join next week anyways.
Yeah.
But the real question about scheduling, that's a tough one. I agree with you, Andrew. Definitely keeping it for this on the same day and
Mhm.
roughly the same time every week is important. Having a schedule is great. And also for somebody who is really busy, having a schedule means that you can potentially block out that little bit of time so that you can be able to play and be
Right.
present. And for me, when I'm starting a campaign, I'm pretty serious about it. So I tell my players, once we come up with a day, like we'll be able to change it in the future if we need to. But my expectation as the DM, as the person who's running the game for you, is that we're going to play most of the time, right? So like out of 10 games, like really, hopefully we're playing, 8 out of 10 games, right? That's an ideal 7 or 8 out of 10 games. Because if we're only playing 50% of the time, then the scheduling needs to change. Maybe we need to play less often. I prefer playing every week, but
I do
understand that.
I do every other.
Yeah, and that works for some people, and that might be easier on people's schedule. It just depends.
Yeah.
So if you're having an issue scheduling. I I know a lot of people might disagree, but I firmly believe that if somebody really wants to play and you aren't playing for 8 hours, let's say your block is like a realistic 3 hour time period for
Right.
playing,
Right.
anyone can make that happen if they really truly do want to play.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing I do too, I'll end this question answer thing with this too. One thing I do to also kind of help, and it might help, I know it helps me at least, is I already spoke that we use a Discord channel. In there I have a schedule channel, and I use a little like calendar bot, a Discord bot that lets people literally sign up, kind of like an event meeting like you would get at like your office.
Wow.
That way it's here's the day, here's the time, here's a brief recap of what happened last session, and then who can make it, who can't make it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that way it's right there. And then like the morning of, it sends an automatic reminder of don't forget tonight's whatever.
Dude,
So
yeah.
like I'll use that too. And I know it helps me because then it's like, ah, shit, I got to write them notes.
You're high tech, man. I just like text people. I should get an automatic system going on.
I mean, hey man, work smarter, not harder. Why text a bunch of people if I can get a little robot to do it for me?
True that.
But
Usually we talk after the session, immediately after session, and say, hey, next week is good
Yeah.
for everybody.
I do that too.
And that doesn't always work, I understand, but with only 3 people
Right.
and myself, it works pretty well.
But the nice thing that the schedule bot does, because sometimes I'll get, because especially the one player I have, her schedule changes all the time because of her work. So she's like, it should be, but I'll let you know. So the nice thing with the scheduler is I'll post that up like the next night, and I can see days out if it's going to be 2 people absent or 1 person absent or whatever. I can see that days out, so I can proactively start inquiring to, hey, it's looking like we're down 2 players. Do you guys still want to go, or do you want to postpone?
Right.
You know, so I can like proactively get there before the day of. That way it's not a last minute, you know, giving people a 3-hour gap in their busy life.
Totally.
But anyway, do we have any other questions? We're at
And
our
one
hour
last
mark.
question, which
All
is
right.
just like a random one, and it's
Sure.
how do you handle switching weapons? Which is a very broad question, but I'm assuming they mean in combat.
Yeah. In combat, it takes a full action, doesn't it? There's actually a
Well,
written rule for this.
I'm sure there is.
There's actually a written rule for this where it's like you drop the weapon. Well, so then the question is, are they say they're switching from a sword to a bow. Say they're pulling a Legolas and they're putting the bow away and pulling the sword. Are they properly putting the bow away, or are they dropping it? If they're just straight dropping it, I would let that go. I would let the straight drop and pull out as a free action go. If they're going to properly put it away and then pull out, that's going to eat at least the bonus action.
Okay. That's kind of similar to my
But
thoughts.
I think there's a written rule. While you answer, I'm going to look this up real quick.
Look it up.
There's
I'm
got to
sure
be
there's
a
a
written rule.
I'm sure there is. I always thought it was a free action, but the way I handle it is if they're in combat and they are within, or an enemy is within melee range of them, then it is a bonus action because you have to consider, potentially parrying the enemy or being on the defensive while you're doing it. But if they're not within melee range of an enemy, to me, it's a free action. I don't know. I just think it's easier that way. And my players don't switch weapons all that often, so it's not something that I encounter too much. But if they're directly engaged, it's a bonus action. If not, it's a free action.
So, other activity on your turn. This is on dndbeyond.com. It says,
Official.
your turn can include a variety of flourishes that require neither your action nor your move. You can communicate, however, you are able through brief utterances, gestures as you take your turn, meaning like, get him, or, go heal them. That's quick. You can also interact with one object or feature of the environment for free during either your move or your action. For example, you could open a door during your move as you stride toward a foe, or you could draw your weapon as part of the same action. you use to attack. So I still stand by what I said. If it's gonna be if it's gonna be a if it's a free action to pull the weapon out, but they want to, like, say, sheathe the sword to then pull out the bow, I'm eating that, at least that bonus for that sheath motion, because that's a very you know what I mean? That's not grabbing a doorknob and opening it with your offhand. That's not like, that's not a very quick thing to do. You know, if you're gonna just drop your weapon and then pull out the next thing,
Yeah.
like you ran out of arrows in your crossbow, or you ran out of, or bolts in your crossbow, or out of arrows or whatever, or, you know, you rolled a complete nat 1 and maybe it's a cursed item and it shatters, and, you know, then it's like, okay, fine, you know, you're either dropping it or you're putting it away. And if you're putting it away carefully, I would say between putting it away carefully and drawing the next thing, that's going to take time. You know what I mean?
I want to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
I know we're like out of time, but just curious.
No,
so
fine.
I'm wondering if, and you say putting away delicately, but what if if they're in combat, prepared for combat, wouldn't they have thought about this? Maybe there's a way that there, you know, is an easy way to do that. I don't know if that exists in real life or not, but my thought when you said draw arrow and shoot it, that's like quite an action. I mean, the difference between getting an arrow off of your hip on a quiver, drawing it and shooting is almost the same as sheathing a sword, or I just feel like it is.
Have you seen pro archers?
I have. Pro archers don't pull it from a quiver.
Yeah. No. There's like pro medieval style archers, dude, and they are stupid fast.
Nah, I just think, and they're trained, right? So that's my point. That's my devil's advocate. Wouldn't you be trained to be able to put your sword away quickly? I don't know. That's just a thought.
I think that's one of those ambiguous rules that it's up to the DM. And I think as far as changing weapons, for me, would depend on the ridiculousness. And I say ridiculousness very, like, non-maliciously, but like the ridiculousness to what the ask is.
Yeah, like if you're trying to put a buster sword into a bag of holding.
Right. You know, like, if you're, well, no, but like, seriously, like, if you're trying to be like, oh, well, I'm a dual wielder, and then I want to put both swords away, and then, you know, go into my bag of holding and pull out a mace. It's like, no. No.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work.
That's a lot. Right. That's a lot. You know, but if you're just, you know, fine. But to your point, fine. I can buy that. If you're going to drop your sword or resheath the sword to do something else, all right, I might let that go. But at the same time, like, truly, how often does that come up?
It's hard. Well, here's the thing. If you're talking about real combat and you're talking about, or if you're reflecting on real combat and you're thinking about a parry and maybe somebody disarms you, there's plenty of weapons that were meant to be drawn immediately after you're disarmed.
Agreed.
Shorter swords and other things like that. So if you're already kind of a proficient with using two weapons, that might be something that you wouldn't worry about as much anyways.
Right.
I don't know.
This is where you just become a warlock, and then you just, oh, you disarmed me. Schlink. I have my sword again, asshole.
Yeah, that could work. That could work. As long as they don't disarm you like too far away, right? Because if it's so far,
or literally disarm you, like no more arm.
But then, well, that's a whole nother story.
Then would it be a floating sword?
Right, that'd be cool. All right.
Anyway.
Well, that's all I got.
All right. Yeah, I think that's all I got too. I mean, as far as DMs getting started, though, I would encourage anybody to just go try it. I mean, and if you're super nervous, grab a module. The Essentials kit comes with a really simple, cool module. There's a ton of free stuff online. You can purchase people's homebrewed modules. There's tons of stuff like Avernus, Sword Coast. You know, there's a ton of stuff that's pre-built where you don't have to go through nearly the amount of prep work as what we do for our homebrew games. I'm like a masochist and I went right to homebrew for my very first DMing experiences, but that's me. I create for literally a living, so it's not that big of a deal to me. But I encourage anybody just to try it, because it's not that daunting, and you don't have to know all the rules. That'd be my other big thing, is if you're scared to DM because you don't know all the rules, so what? Go watch an episode of Critical Role. Matt Mercer looks up a rule at least once an episode. Like, and he's a professional who's been doing it for decades.
Yeah, I've been playing D&D since I was 12, and I like know maybe like 6 rules by heart.
Your phone is your best friend as a DM. You can literally just Google, go to your search engine, type in 5e if you're playing D&D 5e, and then whatever. That's literally what I just did for that switching weapon thing. And then just learn some of the sites like Roll20, D&D Beyond, Don John. You know, there's a few sites that are super helpful for rules. And it's like, yeah, that's your best friend, is to just Google, and and talk through it with your party too, because there are rules that are ambiguous. And like I said before, if you make a decision, write it down. That way you can reference it later. That way if a player questions it later, well, didn't we decide on this? You can go back to referencing how your now homebrew version of that rule is going to work. You know, that way there's no discrepancies later in life and no one gets butthurt over anything. But yeah, I would definitely just suggest trying it. Grab a couple friends, try it. There's a ton of stuff you can do. If anybody is gonna try it and needs help, please be more than welcome to reach out to me. I know, I'm sure Luke feels the same way. Just reach out. Happy to help. There's tons of tabled books that you can buy, sites that generate tables, sites that generate entire taverns with a name and, you know, barmaid and menu. I mean, that's how I've done half my town. I just kept hitting refresh on a generator till I found a menu that was amusing to me. So, I mean, there's tons of resources to make a DM's life easy. I think the biggest challenge for a new DM is figuring out the best way that you work. And I'd be willing to bet that the way you worked in like high school or college with notes, of how you wrote your notes for like a class for your like a test or an exam, is probably going to be the best route for you to go for your DMing.
Yeah.
Because I know I write my notes the exact same way I wrote in college.
Same.
So
literally the same.
I would start there. And then, yeah, and if you're slacking on improv, it's just practice. Or look up some videos. But it's, even if you watch every last video on improv on YouTube, you bleed YouTube dry of improv videos, it still ain't gonna mean shit until you practice it.
Also, I'm very weird. Keep this in mind. If you know me, you know that I'm a strange person, which is, you know, whatever, that's just me. It can be fun to practice improv situations with strangers, because they don't know you, they don't know who you are, and you can just have a fun time. So let's say you're like going to get a coffee at Starbucks, just like, you know, have some fun with it. It as long as you're nice and kind to them, no harm, no foul.
Now I need the weirdest story from this.
Oh,
I know I have one that I did by accident.
I do it all the time, so I feel like this.
I was at Target once and I was buying a bunch of shit and I put it all in the belt, and for whatever reason I just decided to be like Garth from Wayne's World, and I just blurted out, "I'd like to buy this now." and the cashier was like, "Okay, we can do that." I swear she probably thought for like half a second I was like a sped kid, because I was like, "I'd like to buy this now."
I thought, I don't care.
That too. She's probably like, "This isn't my break time yet. Like, I want to go home." Exactly. Anyway, all right. Well,
I'll think about it and come up with a story next week. So
yes,
tune in next week if you want to hear my story, or I'll do one between now and next week, and then I'll tell you about it.
Okay. Yeah, but all right. Well, no, there won't be one next week.
Okay, sorry.
Deep Speech will be
Oh,
back in 2 weeks.
Right. My bad.
Though I encourage everybody to follow us on our individual Instagrams, because next week we will be posting the new topic for you all to start submitting your questions. In the interim, follow us on the YouTubes and the Twitches down and below by hitting subscribe and that little bell so you get the alerts for when stuff gets posted. And then, yeah, on Wednesday we will post the new topic. I don't have the foggiest of what I want to do, but maybe Luke has an idea. Or maybe you want to see something. Give us a suggestion for a topic. I think the DM one was a suggestion, which is completely cool. So we'll post that on Wednesday in our stories. I try to post them a few times in our stories. But yeah. And then, yeah, just stay tuned. And then if we figure out the podcast bit to get us on the Spotify's and such, I purposely sound like a dad. This is me being weird. I constantly plural like Facebook and Instagram just to be weird. The Facebooks and the Instagrams.
There you go.
Just to sound like a geezer. My knees make me feel old, man.
Oh no.
Dude, I grew up playing hockey. My knees are shot. And now I have the bright idea of trying to mountain bike. And my knees are like, what is wrong with you?
Huh. Yeah. I don't have great knees either, but I do love to bike, so same boat.
Anyway. But until then, I will hopefully finish my Bahir on Monday. Going a little off book for the player's manual. I'm not doing the white underside. I don't like that look. But I'm going to probably base it. I have Vallejo Earth texture coming. I'm excited for that.
Nice.
And because I didn't like the little pudding base they gave me. It's really dumb.
Nah, I always take those off.
But it's like got these little cutouts for like the feetsies to like sit in there, and they don't sit in there right. So I'm just gonna mount up a bunch of earth and stick it in. But yeah, so follow us on all the things. We'll post a new topic on Wednesday, and then join me on Monday for Paint and Hang, or we'll see you in 2 weeks on Deep Speech. Until then, bye everybody.